All right, so let's talk about A New Hope, Star Wars, as it was called before they actually gave it a title and a number. Mm-hmm. Matthew Kadish, why don't you set the table for us on this movie? What is this movie about, and how freaking awesome is it?
It's pretty freaking awesome.
How perfect is it on a narrative standpoint?
Narrative standpoint, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably put it at a 7.5, possibly an 8.
You're such a hard sell.
Well, I mean, it has its issues. Don't get me wrong. But
nothing's perfect, Jude.
But Empire's pretty close. But
cheers to that.
What's interesting about A New Hope is that you kind of got to put it within the context of its time. When this movie was being made, storytelling was in the middle of a countercultural revolution. And there was this whole new generation of filmmakers that were kind of coming up through the ranks of Hollywood, because Hollywood was transitioning from a studio kind of system where movies were shot, indoors on sound stages, and they were all very clean and sterile and kind of had to obey certain rules. And this new generation, kind of led by Francis Ford Coppola, they were known as the countercultural generation, and they were making movies that were just breaking all the old Hollywood rules. And Lucas, he had just come off of American Graffiti, which was, it was a pretty standard movie in terms of the stuff that was coming out during that time. And he really pushed the envelope of what a movie could do. And in fact, he pushed it so much that pretty much everyone thought this movie was going to bomb. Like, he had a screening of a rough cut of the movie for, I believe it was Coppola, Spielberg, and John Milius, who was kind of an up-and-coming filmmaker at the time. And he didn't have any of the special effects done. He had kind of B-roll footage of World War II, dogfights spliced into the film. And
Bomber Brigade, is that the movie that he used?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And when the movie was over, both Milius and Coppola just let him have it. They're like, this movie's terrible. It's awful. You need to do this. You need to do that. And the only one who actually said George, I think this is pretty good, it was Spielberg. And when this movie came out, first of all, it was a technical marvel, because no movie had ever done special effects quite like this movie had in the past. We talked about earlier that up to that point, the biggest science fiction film to be made was 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. And that had kind of these special effects. They weren't cutting edge, but they were the best they could do at the time. And, Lucas, he'd always been kind of an experimental filmmaker. That was his real bread and butter, was THX 1138 and the weird stuff like that.
It still is too, I think.
Yeah.
I have a feeling he's got a backlog of weird movies that he hasn't released yet.
But the really fascinating thing about how he approached this movie is that, in addition to it being technically advanced in terms of the special effects and the filmmaking, was his approach to crafting the story. And he went through, I would argue that George Lucas is not a good writer.
We talked about this before.
But he's a good conceptualizer. And he was heavily influenced by this Kurosawa film called The Hidden Fortress. And his original drafts of Star Wars were actually basically an Americanized version of this Akira Kurosawa film, which, for those of you who don't know who Akira Kurosawa is, he was basically the biggest filmmaker in Japan. He was kind of their version of Hitchcock, or I guess modern day Spielberg or something like that. But he was this foreign filmmaker who had a huge impact on this countercultural generation of filmmakers. Because he was making most of his movies in the 50s, but he was doing stuff that was so outside of what Hollywood was doing that it was just mesmerizing to the people who would watch his movies. And so Spielberg was heavily influenced by this particular film of his called The Hidden Fortress, and his early drafts of the original Star Wars were very close to what that movie was. And then over time, he kind of began studying what was called the hero's journey, which is based off of Joseph A. Campbell's analysis of Greek mythology, A Hero with a Thousand Faces. And from that book, Lucas kind of came up with this hero's journey structure, which is actually, it basically revolutionized how big budget blockbuster science fantasy stuff is told, because it's the journey of, a mythical hero. And once he kind of got the structure down, he applied it to Star Wars, and he started making changes from what it was originally, which was a ripoff of this Hidden Fortress movie.
Yeah.
And it evolved into what it became. And the impact of this is just, it can't even be stated, because it basically changed the way Hollywood went about structuring its movies and, character arcs and things like that. It was very like revolutionary, I guess you could say. And people have studied Star Wars as like a textbook example of how you structure not only like a movie, but a particular type of movie like the hero's journey and a trilogy at large. Unfortunately, I don't think the people who made the sequels really studied it all that much. But if you look at A New Hope, beat for beat, it is structurally perfect. Like from a meta point of view, if you're looking at it from the 1,000-foot, viewpoint, this
you got
movie,
the call to action, the refusal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything that happens in this movie is just perfectly plotted out to the 100th degree. So, most film schools, especially like screenwriting schools or even just writing classes, look at New Hope as the textbook example of how to do a perfect 3-act structure hero's journey. And when I was rewatching it, I was just so struck at like how elegant it was. And, a lot of this was kind of like fixed in the editing room by George Lucas's wife, who kind of came in and cleaned up a lot of the mistakes that he made. But the genesis of it started with the script. And even though I don't think George Lucas is a very talented writer or director, he has like this instinctual kind of storytelling compass, I guess you could say, that guides him to the right direction.
Well, have you ever heard his comments? I can't remember when he gave an interview, but he talked about his thoughts on storytelling. And he basically said, like, I believe there's only like 33 or 32 different types of stories that can actually be told. And anything beyond that is just a variation of those stories.
Yeah, he was talking about, they say there's only 33 master plots out there, and everything is just like a variation on those. And I would say that 33 is a bit much. I think there are probably more like 12.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, 12 master plots that you could fit pretty much every movie into. And some of them double up, so you can have a hero's journey, but you can also have something like a quest story or a chase story or something like that in addition to. All right, so getting back to this whole concept of the 33 master plots that George Lucas had, one of the things that's interesting about this is that you have to remember, before the countercultural kind of rise of these filmmakers, all film people kind of went through an apprenticeship system where they worked on movies, they worked their way up, and eventually they became like directors and creatives and stuff like that. And George Lucas was part of the first generation of film school filmmakers, where they went to UCLA and USC and they studied the craft of filmmaking, but they also studied like film theory and storytelling and stuff like that. And so when it comes to the hero's journey structure that George kind of pioneered, it was an outgrowth of kind of like this generation of people who actually studied film, as opposed to just tradesmen who worked their way up through it. And this can't be stressed enough, like the impact that film schools had on people like Spielberg and Lucas and, Scorsese and stuff like that. And Star Wars: A New Hope is kind of an outgrowth of that study, because even though like George Lucas, he's a very competent technical craftsman. He's someone who, when it comes to technology, he gets very in the weeds with it. He understands it. And the same thing can be said of, writing, where he's competent enough in terms of like the theory behind the writing. It's just the actual execution of the writing that, he sometimes struggles with. And when it came to A New Hope, his kind of craftsmanship of the story's narrative is really the thing that kind of makes this movie work, in addition to the technical aspect of it. So, he told a very simple story. And it's like, when I was rewatching it, I was just floored, especially now that I've like I think I was telling you guys earlier, like I hadn't watched these movies in like a while now, even though I've watched them like 1,000 times. And like comparing them to the new stuff that we've gotten, like it just makes me appreciate like how well made they are.
Yeah. Jude, on your most recent rewatch, how did A New Hope make you feel like when you were watching it again? Of course, you've seen it a million times, I'm sure, but
I haven't seen it that many times.
you haven't. Oh,
No, I'm not like you guys.
oh, okay. So rewatching it, like,
Now,
did
if it
you
were Harry Potter, it'd be a different story.
Freak that pothead. So what are your thoughts on A New Hope? What is it about this movie that you find so much enjoyment out of?
I think there's just something so bewitching about this tridge that the newer movies just don't have. There's just something like captures you, and it's timeless, and the story sucks you in, and it's beguiling, and it's hard to find something that transcends time and still holds up, that just takes a hold of you.
Who do you connect with the most out of this movie? Do you connect with Princess Leia or Luke Skywalker? Or Han Solo? Or Chewbacca?
C-3PO.
C-3PO?
I love that man.
Tell me more.
That's my boy.
Tell me more. What is it about C-3PO that...
He's just always nervous.
Anthony Daniels?
I love him.
Oh, that's amazing. I did not expect you to say that.
C-3PO and R2-D2 are the best characters in the whole thing.
Really?
I love them.
Oh, it's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
They are what George Lucas set
That's
them
the
up.
love story that no one talks about.
George Lucas set those two up to be the ones who were basically telling the story in this.
Yeah,
in this
they're like
trilogy.
Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah, actually, like going back to the influence of Akira Kurosawa and The Hidden Fortress, that movie, Akira Kurosawa chose to tell the story through the point of view of the two lowest characters, who are these two peasants, one tall one short one.
Yeah.
And they're always bickering with one another.
Yeah.
And George Lucas specifically, based R2-D2 and C-3PO on these two characters. In fact, if you watch The Hidden Fortress, you'll see like, the scene where like C-3PO and R2-D2 are together on Tatooine and they split up. That's taken right from the Hidden Fortress because there's a scene where that actually happens with those characters. But George was so fascinated with this concept of telling this big epic story through the point of view of the two lowest characters in the ensemble. And that's what he translated over to his version.
Do you guys think that was carried through in the other three movies that he did in the prequels? Do you think that idea of having the story told by R2 and C-3PO?
No, I feel like that was something that was very specific to the original trilogy. And I was going to talk about this when we got to Return of the Jedi, but like 3PO has a character arc that goes through all three movies, where he starts off by saying he's not a very good storyteller, and then by Jedi, he's regaling the Ewoks with like this fascinating story.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And so like that's his character arc throughout the trilogy.
And it's such a full story from start to finish of these two droids, where they start and everything that they go through.
Wow. I actually don't think I've ever connected those dots before, but he does say that line. I'm not very good at telling stories, as he's getting out of the oil bath in A New Hope. And then he's sitting in front of the Ewoks, like explaining the whole
he's their
saga.
god at that point.
Oh my gosh, dude. I've never put those two things together. I don't know how I missed that. That's amazing.
That just goes to show the quality of the storytelling in the original trilogy, where structurally everything works. Everyone has a character arc. Everyone has some type of transformative arc. There's just so much that goes on within these three movies that it's just textbook perfect.
Yeah.
And part of that is just seeing how these characters evolve over the course of like all the main characters evolve. Even Darth Vader, evolves over the course of these movies. And it's fascinating, like, rewatching them. It's fascinating to like look at it and deconstruct it and like figure it all out.
Yeah. And that's like what I was talking about when we were doing the Westworld review. And when I was saying about like, I trust this storytelling because I know that there's a reason for everything that they do. And that's how I feel about this original trilogy, and I don't feel like that with any of the other movies. They just do for the sake of doing it. And there's just characters for the sake of merchandising them. And I don't believe in it, and I don't trust in it. And it has no place in my heart. But with this, every single thing that they did was for a reason. And I just give myself over to the story of it and just let myself enjoy it and not pick it apart like I would something else.
You guys are all so deep.
Vader, what's your favorite part
Kater's
of the
taking
duo?
us to school over here.
I love that stuff, though.
What's my favorite part?
Yeah, what's your favorite part?
I
of
like the
duo?
lasers and the blasters and the space fights.
Matt, how great was that opening scene where they're, what was the name of the Corellian transport that Leia was on?
Tavern 5?
Tavern 5.
Something like that. Some nerd's going to yell at me for not.
People are going to like put me on the spot and I can't think of it.
Well, it's just
Bad nerd.
like we're all of like Leia's troops are in that
Corvette.
hallway.
Leia's Corvette.
Yeah, Leia's Corvette. They're in the hallway and, they're just waiting for the stormtroopers to break in. And that opening fight is just like I don't know, there's something magical about it. And I was telling Jude that if you really look at how that opening scene is structured, where like the hallways are just these very stark white. And, one of the reasons they did that, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons is so that when Darth Vader enters and he's just like in pure black from head to toe, he stands out amongst everything
And
else.
then that 7-year-old kid in the audience, like me, goes, "Whoa, that dude's cool." So
Doesn't say a word, just steps in,
Yep.
looks around, and
looks at his
walks.
dead troopers like losers. So what else? Tell me about the whole movie though, Vader. What is it that draws that movie to you, or
it's just a classic, man. I can't sit here and tell you in detail about how it affected me. It just did. It was my first big time movie experience that I remember. It just had that effect on me.
the first time you saw a lightsaber, Obi-Wan versus Vader.
Coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you we kind of saw Luke ignite it in the hut, so we kind of had an idea of what to expect. But like, I wish I could have been there for the first time. Like, what is this magical device?
Right.
This Excalibur of light? Like that was
I was
amazing.
just everything from the land speeder hovering over the things and the Jawas and the big giant
the sandcrawler,
crawler and everything about that movie just screamed amazingness to me. It was awesome. And
Yeah, that cantina scene.
yeah.
Oh my
See
goodness!
all the different aliens.
Yeah, I actually prefer the theatrical version.
But
for that too.
the best part about that whole cantina scene is growing older and reading about how they made that, and it's just a bunch of old
Halloween
masks
and
and
stuff.
stuff. Yeah, it's crazy.
That's good
Doing it
stuff.
on a budget.
First time you get to meet Han Solo and Chewbacca, like Harrison Ford just
Yep.
being the Harrison
Such a cool
40th
drink of
person
water.
you could. Yeah, it's like, man, he was just too perfect for that role. Like I don't think he wanted it. He didn't want it, and George didn't want him to be in it. I think because George was like, I don't want Harrison to be the guy that I put in all my movies, right?
Well, he was helping George out by reading the sides for auditioning.
Yeah.
And George was just like, he's pretty good at this.
He's really good at this guy. He is kind
Yeah,
of
he
Han
had
Solo.
something visually completely different planned out for that character.
Oh yeah, I have the hardback copy of the original screenplay, and Han Solo is like a giant green lizard person or something. But they also had Kurt Russell play for Han Solo at one point. Like there's old videotapes of him auditioning with Carrie Fisher as Han Solo, and it's pretty funny because we were talking about him with Tango and Cash and stuff, and it's funny to see Lethal Weapon. It's funny to see how they kind of all these classic actors that we all watch and love kind of got their start at the same spot and kind of auditioned for
like
similar
that Saturday
roles.
Night Live sketch where Christopher Walken auditions for Star Wars as Han Solo. It's pretty good.
But, can you imagine anybody else in the role?
No, I can't.
You can't.
It kind of makes me sad that he doesn't really care about that character very much, but I can't imagine anybody else in it.
Well, acting has always just been kind of like a gig to Harrison Ford. Like he doesn't get too deep into it.
Yeah.
But one of the fun things I learned from, kind of watching YouTube with Jude about these movies was that bartender in the cantina scene where he's like, we don't serve their kind here. There's actually a book, like a Star Wars book, where they talk about his character and that bartender's
Yeah, he
backstory.
has a whole backstory.
And
Everybody has a
and
backstory.
his parents were killed by droids in the Clone Wars, and so that's why he has such a prejudice against droids.
Now, this book came out after the prequels, then, right? Or was this prequels?
No, I think it came out after the prequels.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say because they started tying.
But it was really interesting.
Yeah, it is a good callback, and it kind of makes sense as to like the setup of the world. Like we watching the original trilogy and then watching the prequels, I didn't really, because I wasn't a huge fan of the prequels, but watching the original trilogy, you kind of connect these dots now. And I think we talked about it with Rogue One or something last week, where like all these people that are alive now in this trilogy were alive during the Clone Wars. So they got to see all these robots and droids killing all their family members and going to war and stuff. So it makes sense that they would have some kind of prejudice against them.
But I do wish George had taken a little bit more care in crafting the prequels to tie in better with the original trilogy.
Yeah, there's one thing that always sticks with me with the original trilogy and the prequels not really tying together is Obi-Wan Kenobi, where he's obviously like in his 60s, but according to the timeline, Anakin's only like 45 in Return of the Jedi.
but also like if you watch Revenge of the Sith, he asks once Anakin becomes Darth Vader, he asks the Emperor like what happened to Palpatine, or I'm sorry, what happened to Padme?
Oh yeah,
and Palpatine is like, in your rage you killed her, and this was while she was pregnant.
Yeah,
and so when he finds out Luke Skywalker is alive, and he's before the Emperor, he's like, how is that possible? Because like if he actually killed Padme, before she was able to have the kids, then Luke wouldn't be alive. And so like I'm just sitting there, I'm like, this doesn't really jive with how Revenge of the Sith ended. Because at that point, the moment Vader knows that he has a son that's alive and he senses it to be true, he should know that Palpatine lied to him and manipulated him. And so like you would think that would set him off to go down the path of betraying Palpatine ultimately, which he eventually does.
Yeah,
but,
I think it does.
But he also resists betraying him as well. So like within if you look at the original trilogy like in isolation, what Vader does works. It tracks through all three movies. But when you add in the prequels, there's some divergences there that don't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah,
I think the other thing too is Obi-Wan not knowing who R2-D2 was, seeing which he spent, or C-3PO, seeing which he spent most of the Clone Wars with or around them, knew them by name multiple times, and you're like, I don't remember ever owning any droids. Very interesting. Like, what, dude? R2's like, how dare you?
He didn't want to blow his cover.
Yeah. Okay. Cover.
Old Ben.
And there's also the talk.
Yes, the other thing too is he's like, Ben Kenobi. I haven't been called Obi-Wan since before you were born. Like, no, you've never been called Ben.
Yeah.
Until he was born. It's little nitpicky things.
Well, also,
like that.
They still called him Obi-Wan after he was born.
Yeah.
But there was also there's another thing that didn't make a whole lot of sense.
That's all right. Padme died. Oh, well, it's Return of the Jedi. But anyway, we don't have to bag on the prequels anymore. We did that for a full podcast already.
Yeah.
So
probably going to come up a couple more times.
Let's talk about, like, we kind of mentioned the hero's journey, and we get to see Luke kind of like refuse the call to adventure with Obi-Wan. Like, I can't go to Anchorage, or I can't go to Alderaan. I'm late. I'm in for it as it is. I got to go home.
I got to farm.
Some moisture. And
one more season, and then I'm out.
Yeah, and then we get to see. I think one of the most impactful moments for me as a kid is seeing Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru as skeletons on the desert right in front of their homestead.
Super G-rated.
Yeah,
yeah. That was a traumatic thing.
It was very traumatic for me.
That and the sand person, like that thing, I told Jude, I was like, when I was a kid, that would scare the crap out of me.
Dude, I remember because like the shot of them as skeletons like smoldering in the distance was such a quick shot in the movie. Like when I was younger,
it was so gruesome.
I used to pause it to see because I was like, oh, I wonder how much they show. Like I just was curious, like morbidly curious as to what they.
It's the most nudity you'd ever seen in your entire child life.
It's like, man, those stormtroopers.
You're like, oh, they don't have any clothes on.
They don't miss. Those stormtroopers don't miss, and they'll mess you up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. What's the line that Obi-Wan says? Like, only Imperial stormtroopers are so precise.
Yes.
and getting the arm cut off with all the blood.
Oh yeah, there's blood in the cantina. Yeah,
only blood in Star Wars.
Is it? What about the mist in
It's supposed
episode
to
1? Does that count? It does cauterize, or it does now. I don't know. It didn't used to. But anyway, I like all these scenes that I remember by heart and all these lines and stuff. It's so much fun to go back and revisit.
And it is interesting seeing like the setting on Tatooine and watching, Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress, because a lot of where the Hidden Fortress is it's hidden in the mountains. And so you have this very stark rocky terrain, and it's almost like that was copied exactly for, the Tatooine portion of.
I'm gonna have to watch that movie.
You're gonna have to read though. It's
it's all.
I gotta read this movie.
Yeah, you gotta read this movie.
Okay,
it's in Japanese.
But you've said this multiple times, and I can't help but bring it up now because it'd be pointless not to. But this whole idea of like inspiration versus ripoff, where it's very, very clear that George Lucas just lifted ideas straight from Kurosawa films and brought them over to his own thing and kind of made them his own, or made them his own, and created this new world that we all fall in love with. But now today, if somebody says, "Oh, that's just a ripoff of this movie," like everybody rips movies off from everybody else that inspired them as kids or inspired them growing up.
But there's a difference between ripoffs and influences.
Is there though?
There is. Yes.
I think it's in how
because
well you do
if you look at the Hidden Fortress and you look at Star Wars, they're two very different movies. But you can definitely tell the impact that the Hidden Fortress had on Lucas as a filmmaker, because like the transitional wipes are like he was influenced,
Rip-off.
but it wasn't a ripoff because lots of people use transitional wipes, but the way that they were used is something that George Lucas liked to communicate the passage of time, and that was something that Kurosawa kind of pioneered. Also, a big thing that Kurosawa did was like the multi-shot one take, where basically it's a single camera setup. But the way that it's blocked out, where the actor's moving and the camera moves and stuff like that, you go from like a wide shot to a close up to a medium shot, all within a single take.
Do you have an example of that?
Well, I mean, just look at any Spielberg movie. That's where Spielberg got it from. It's one of those things where, it's about efficiency in the camera and using like a long lens, but also, the way that you frame the shot. And, that was something that Kurosawa kind of pioneered, and that was something that was a big influence on Lucas as well.
That's all technical stuff. But I'm talking about like actual scenes and characters and moments in the story that are lifted straight from.
But I mean, like you could just say like, he ripped off Arthurian legend or something like that.
There's only 33.
No, 12.
Yeah, 12.
12 different stories to tell.
But the point I'm trying to make is like it's not. Like if he had ripped off Hidden Fortress, it would have been the exact same story, exact same characters, just told in a slightly different way. Star Wars is its own story. It's this hero's journey of this farm boy who gets called into like a much bigger thing. The character of Luke Skywalker did not exist in the Hidden Fortress, and the character of Obi-Wan Kenobi is very different from the general played by Toshiro Mifune in the Hidden Fortress. The characters that are the most similar are actually the princess in the Hidden Fortress and Princess Leia, because they're both very headstrong, independent, like female characters who like lose their kingdom and have to like kind of rise up and rebuild the resistance to this evil rival empire.
Because George Lucas is a feminist SJW, right, Jude?
Patriarchy.
Because he wrote a female character to be strong and independent.
No
How dare
comment.
he? How dare he?
Oh, therefore he can't be a chauvinist.
Now, did you connect with Princess Leia at all growing up, or do you remember her?
You already asked her this question.
Did I?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
see, it's
you
been-
asked me who I most identify with.
And I was
And she said
surprised.
C-3PO.
Yeah, C-3PO.
Did
'cause he's nervous.
identify with Leia at all? I don't think so.
Wow. Okay.
No.
Cool. Matt, what's your favorite part of this movie?
My favorite part of this movie?
Ultimate favorite part. Is it the Darth Vader reveal, or is it anything else later on?
I don't know. I always like the scenes of the Death Star when they're kind of like running.
Dog fighting.
No, not the dog fighting. I mean, everybody likes that, but like the
Escaping.
the lightsaber fight
Okay.
when he kills Obi-Wan. That was a pretty powerful moment right there, where they're running out into the bay with the ship and they're fighting over there in the corner and stuff. Yeah. So
Kadish, what's your favorite part of this movie?
I have so many favorite parts, but the thing that really kind of stands out to me the most is the climax where they're doing the assault on the Death Star. And I mean, that scene is just like, at the time it was a technological marvel, but if you look at how it plays out, they're like, you know, the stakes just keep getting bigger and bigger, and there's the ticking clock where like they're almost in range of the rebel base to destroy it, and there's so much at stake, and the rebels are getting like destroyed by like the minute Vader comes onto the scene, and he just like messes up all their well thought out battle plans. And Vader's 2 seconds away from killing Luke, and then Han Solo swoops in. It's such a well structured final battle, and when you also couple that with the fact that it's so technically advanced for its time, and it still holds up to this day, like how well shot it was. I just think that makes the movie like what it is. That makes
there's really no scenes in this movie I don't like.
Yeah.
I could sit there and I could watch this probably every day still, if it's on.
There's always something that stands out in every scene.
Yeah.
You know, like she's rich,
Rich, powerful. Yeah. If you were to rescue her, the reward would be
there's not a lot
more money than you could imagine.
Well, I don't know. I can imagine quite a bit. Yeah.
Like
there's not a lot of movies out there that if I'm flipping through the channels and it's on, I just stop.
Yeah.
And don't start.
I think,
and just watch. You know, so.
The real thing that makes Star Wars stand out to me, though, is the world building aspect of it. Like, they just have these little throwaway things that they kind of pepper into each of the original trilogy that make the world so much richer.
Yeah.
It's like I think back to when Ben was, or Obi-Wan was talking to Luke in the hut about the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And now look what we got. Yeah. We got 3 movies and
7 seasons
of an
Yeah.
awesome animated show about the Clone Wars, you know.
Yeah.
But even little things like Han's exchange with Greedo about like how you should have turned me in, like at this other place, and Greedo's like, I won't make that same mistake, and the whole thing with Jabba. But even like when Obi-Wan is turning off the tractor beam within the Death Star, there are these 2 stormtroopers there who are kind of like just talking.
Oh yeah,
and they say something. I forget what exactly.
Did you get the new E11?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just like little things like that are just prevalent throughout all 3 of these movies. Just make the universe feel so much more real and so much more interesting.
Jude, what's your favorite scene in A New Hope? Do you have one?
I don't think that I have one favorite scene. Oh, wow. I enjoy just the storytelling of it.
Right on.
I do have a nitpick though.
Oh, go for it.
As is my way. No, I just thought that I think I'm the only person who feels this way, but I felt like Luke's reaction when he saw his aunt and uncle dead paled in comparison to when
Obi-Wan died? Yeah, he didn't even know.
Yeah.
Well, I always thought it was funny.
And like for the rest of the trilogy, he's just like, Ben, I sense you, I feel you, I love you, I adore you, I listen to you. Why didn't you tell me? Oh, I feel so betrayed. And these people raised him.
Yeah.
They were his parents protected him, and he just like kind of stares at him, and he's like, I guess I'll go find Ben.
There was a moment. God, I forgot what it was, but when it was the comparison of Luke and Leia. Like Leia literally just watched her planet get blown, like entire planet. Your home world is gone, and she took it better than Luke took Obi-Wan dying, a guy he knew for like 20 minutes. I always thought that was super funny when somebody brought that up to me.
It was his first adventure,
and she's like. Like talking to him all soft, like, it's okay. Like, I just lost my entire planet. Would you grow up?
Yeah. Technically, I mean, are you even a princess anymore if your planet has exploded?
That's true, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're not a princess at nothing.
So what was the princess? I mean, we're getting into the weeds on this one, but what is the princess title for her? Is it for Alderaan or is it for Naboo?
At this time in movie making, in order for there to be an important female character, she had to be royalty.
Okay.
Well, it was for Alderaan.
Was it for Alderaan and not Naboo? Because her mother technically was the queen of Naboo.
She was a double princess.
Double princess.
Like a double?
Yeah. Well, her mom was just a senator at the time that she was
former
born,
queen.
So.
Former queen.
Yeah, but it's an elected position.
Yeah, but isn't that like everybody who's a president still gets called Mr. President after they're not in office anymore?
Well, I mean, they weren't calling her Queen Senator Amidala.
That's in a galaxy far away, though.
This is true. This is very true. Thank you,
Long
Jude.
time ago.
All right, before we get into the next... Oh, what?
Just really quick.
Yeah.
everybody needs to make sure they know this, that Han shot first.
Han shot first.
Yeah.
That was the worst addition.
It's still
to a
terrible.
hero.
They still
Yeah.
can't fix it. I think they've gone through 4 different iterations.
Like they even had to go to the Solo standalone film to try to fix that.
Stop
what is that?
perfecting perfection.
Exactly.
What is that thing that they where Greedo says something?
He says McClunka.
McClunky.
McClunka.
McClunky. It's okay, buddy.
They still can't.